It is good to be with you boys today. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Thanks for making the time. And Lucas, thanks for hosting us here at the Southside studio.
Yeah, no problem. It's great to be here with you guys, man.
It's so good.
Yeah, no, because we've got a couple different groups represented, there's a pretty good chance there's a big number of students who don't know each of us. So I figured we should start with some introductions. My name is Zack, and I'm a youth pastor here in town at a church called Broadway. And to my right is a dear friend of mine. Why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Brock, and I'm married to a woman named Kirst, and we pastor at Mainstreet Church. And to my right is a newer dear friend to me.
A newer dear friend.
Yeah.
So my name's Lucas. We're here at the Southside North Campus, the hangar. I have no education in ministry. I've been doing it for about 18 months now, and I'm just loving it though. I really felt called into this spot, and I've been so blessed by your guys' friendship, honestly, and just getting to know you guys and just kind of answering the call that God has put on all of our hearts in different ways. It's been a lot of fun. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, you've been doing an amazing job, and it's been fun to develop a relationship. The three of us talk to each other pretty often, you know, for advice, for support, celebrate what's going on for each other in each other's ministries. So while some of you guys students might not know us, these guys probably know a lot of what's been going on in each of our ministries, and they've been praying for you. So these are friends to each of us. And I look forward for the Broadway folks. I look forward to you guys getting to know Brock and Lucas. Awesome guys, and to get to know them a little bit more. What is something you do for fun outside of ministry, Lucas? What's something you do to have a good time?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I love watching sports. I played university basketball. Weird flex. I know every time I say that, everyone thinks, yeah, I played university basketball. It's no big deal.
And you didn't just play, you won a chip.
I won a chip. I'll let you say it, though, because if I say that, then I'm definitely flexing. So
yeah, no, he won a chip.
Are you trying to say ship or chip?
A championship.
Oh, championship. I was like chip.
So
like,
that's actually interesting because some people say chip, some people say ship.
I mean,
I've never heard chip.
Championship is spelled with the SH, but I just feel like I want a chip.
Chip with a dip.
I was thinking like chip off your
That's
shoulder.
a cool young thing to say.
It's a cool, yeah, Drake made that.
That's really trendy.
I see it now, and I can only ever say I want a chip when I'm speaking on behalf of Lucas,
right.
which is why I like to take.
Moment.
Yeah, I really like to take this opportunity.
You can test it out, yeah.
I can't say it for myself, so.
Yeah, so I love watching sports, playing golf. I wish I could play more sports, but post-COVID, hopefully, we're building a basketball court at the new facility. I got the job here, and that was my one thing. I was like, can we do a basketball court? And they said yes. So, yeah, that's kind of me.
That's
sports
amazing.
guy. Yeah.
Post-COVID, pre-COVID, during COVID, I am doing pretty much just Among Us and then hanging out with you guys. If COVID wasn't a thing, I'd be surfing. That's something my wife and I love to do.
Sick.
And that's not a flex, but
it's impressive. It's really
impressive,
hard.
Right?
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's super hard to do.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing, but I enjoy doing it.
Natural
One thing,
athlete.
talking about the chip, I just realized SMH means shake my head. Is that what it means?
You just realized that?
Oh, dude, this is so embarrassing. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I literally, for the longest time, thought it meant so much honesty. So every time they'd be like, SMH, I'm like, so much honesty. You're right, man. I get it. I know, mind blown. I learned that in Among Us. I was like, dude, how are you being honest right now? You're killing me.
We're young and relevant youth pastors.
Wow.
That's why I'm hanging out with you guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, we're the same age, but I feel 10 years younger.
I know. Kirst was like, when did you turn 50?
Yeah.
Like,
although you have been playing Among Us. I played with a few of my students, and the first round I ever played, I got imposter.
Oh.
Now, I don't know what any of the tasks are to lie. I don't know because I've never been.
To fake the tasks, yeah.
Well, I don't even know that there's tasks to fake, right? It was tough.
You're jumping in vents in front of people.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what was your task? I was like, cleaning vents.
I'm dusting.
Cleaning vents. that was my
Organizing
task.
the plants.
Yeah, I'm like, how did you guys know it was me? I don't get it. Oh, man.
Yeah, so Zach, you found out from us what we like to do. What's something that has been keeping you busy during COVID or even after COVID? What's something that like entertains you?
Yeah, I mean, I love having a bunch of different hobbies and just kind of trying new things. Those of you who are familiar with the Enneagram, I really resonate with the 7 and the 8 sort of situation where I just get like obsessed and interested in new things, and then I really want to do them and learn all about them. So photography is one that I've a hobby that I've been involved in over the past few years. And with COVID, I haven't been able to do it as much. It's just not as smart to be going out and taking pictures of people. But I've started printing some of my old work, and it's a ton of fun. I just find the whole art world interesting, and there's always so much to learn. So it keeps me busy.
And let's just be clear. Okay, and you were about to say that too.
I was getting ready
if
to
we're
flex
talking
for
about
him.
flexing, yeah.
No.
Well, why don't you go ahead, flex for him?
No, it's all good. I'm busy.
The photo that he took for my wife and I celebrating that we were having a kid, absolutely amazing. He did a little photo shoot with us.
Yeah, I saw that.
And the colors, just amazing. Like, made Chilliwack look even more beautiful, which I didn't think you could do.
I mean, Chilliwack does a lot of that on its own. But you bring up something that actually you two have in common that kind of brings the three of us together. Is I was lucky enough to be there for the exact moment that each of you proposed.
That is true.
I just think that's the coolest thing. I feel so lucky to have been present in that moment. Brock, we went on a little surf trip.
Yeah.
And snuck you a ring that looked like you pulled it out of your wetsuit.
Yeah. Awkward position, but it worked out.
It worked out well.
And actually, in both of these situations, we narrowly avoided emergency because we were cooking dinner on a gas stove and it burst into flames. And Brock heroically flung it across the street.
There you go.
And stopped us from having a propane fire.
Yeah.
I'm just a man.
Just a man.
That's
it's
it.
not much, but
I'm
it's
not a
honest.
hero.
Things.
I'm just a man.
Yeah.
And Lucas, we had a bit of an emergency at yours too.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we had the so we set it up from Vetter Rotary Trail. That's what it's called, right?
Yeah.
And we set up like a line of candles all the way out to the water from the trail. And we're like, that's sweet, awesome. I went back to the house.
Oh, so romantic.
It was great. It was perfect. Everything was going to be awesome. There was a little creek running through, but just jump over it, no problem.
Yeah, no problem.
I go home. The plan's about to get set in motion, and I get a call from Zack. And the river, how is that even possible? Like basically
it
a flash
had been pouring the few days previous, and it
yeah.
just took a while for the snowpack to get down to the exact point you had set up
at
candles.
that exact time. And so my pathway was taken from us, and there was a part of the river now in the way. So we scrambled last minute. Great memory. Prayed together. And then he hid and took some pictures of us. It was amazing.
That's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, it was great.
Flash flood.
Flash flood.
Flash flood. Well, flash flood sounds like a bit of a disaster. And I mean, if you have been on social media or the news in the past year, you're familiar with absolute disasters. And that's one of the things we wanted to talk about. What is this thing going on right now where it feels like every time I get a text, check social media, get a news update, or talk to a friend, there's more bad news. Do you guys relate to this? Have you been feeling like there's just too much bad news in your life lately?
I know one thing that I've learned about myself during this time. It's always been there. It's just been kind of like easy to hide, is my addiction to news.
Right.
It's like
really
swiping through Google. I'm like waiting for something. And in such an uncertain time, I'm looking for something that's certain, looking for some news that's like going to solve that uncertain feeling in my heart.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's like eroding and creating more anxiety and
right. And what's interesting about that too is like I feel like at this point in time, there was a stretch where I was in the same boat as you, but it was hurting my heart and my soul so much every time I saw the bad news. And there was just more and more of it, the election and people arguing and yelling at each other, and videos of people beating each other up because they disagree politically. And now it's almost to a point where I think it's dangerous because I'm almost numb to it. I feel like I can almost just see it at any point. And I'm just like, more bad news. That's the world we live in. But what I don't want that to do is to rob my ability to have joy day to day, and to see what's before me, the opportunities in front of me to actually impact and affect people in a positive way. I don't know if you guys can relate to that at all, but
yeah, well, absolutely. And I think of just the sheer scope of bad news we've received this year, like going from kind of the grand scale of a pandemic changing the way we're going to have to operate to kind of the small scale things of canceling a retreat and just having to send that.
Right.
I didn't read that email. I had to be the guy who sends it. And that's not fun either. And then seeing just the political disparity seem to grow wider and wider between people who firmly, resonate with some political opinions and firmly resonate with others. And there really is a big story of open-minded people who are willing to listen in the middle.
Right.
But what we hear about...
Yeah, you don't hear about them in the middle.
Yeah, you often hear about the extremes.
You know what I've noticed during this time is even if you're choosing to avoid the news app or whatever it is, in media, people are sharing like in their stories of all these different, like, it's almost like weekly there's a new big tragedy that's happening. And it's like, if you don't share this story, you're out of touch. And it's just like creating another sense of anxiety. Like, we have to be even more involved into every different type of situation that's happening. And you're kind of stretching yourself so thin.
Right. Exactly. And I feel like what you said, you stretch yourself thin. Maybe you can keep up with reposting all those things, but I feel like if you're so caught up in that, I don't know if that actually has a ton of impact. And then right before you, maybe some of that time you're spending reposting or being anxious about that, you could actually, you know, been kind to that one kid that was sitting alone at, you know, at the bus stop or whatever, but you're too busy trying to have, to keep up. Cause maybe if you don't repost it, you know, you'll get called out for being a bad person or whatever the case may be. And so there's opportunities, I think, right in front of us in real life off of our phones to love our neighbors and to be kind and to be great people and
that's a good word.
And really just reflect the love of Jesus onto the world around us. And that's what I really think that's what our world needs desperately right now.
That's so good, Lucas. I love that because it's practical. Anyone can do that no matter what they're reading. That's something each of us could do. And one thing that I've found very confusing, and I've spent some time pondering about this, is a lot of these crises that we hear about. Like, there have been some severe, legitimate humanitarian crises this year. Some things have gone on in our world that are tragic and terrible with a high cost to human life and human quality of life. You know, explosions in other parts of the world and entire groups of people being told they're not welcome in their country. Terrible things happening around the world. And I personally have felt very overwhelmed by that and very worn out by that. And I was reflecting, asking myself this question, or asking God this question: why is the world getting so much worse? And a thought that came into my head that I've really come to believe is that things have actually always been rough. We've just had the luxury of not knowing about it.
Right.
And as we hear about more of the injustices in our world, we become more aware of what was actually always true. And in the Bible, we get this idea presented to us of God being omniscient, the idea that he knows everything that's going on in the world. And we also get it explained to us that we are not like that. We don't know everything at all times. And it feels like I've started to understand that maybe the internet, in ways, is a human attempt to be omniscient. That we really want, as people, to know as much as God knows.
Right.
I got to write that down. I'm going to preach for that.
Yeah, that's the word.
But the thing is, we're not ready for that. Our brains weren't built for that. And I think of it like a computer, like a hard drive. Like, there's a certain amount of programming space available.
Totally,
and our brains were not meant for omniscience.
Right.
And I think, I know I personally feel like I have been cramming more information than I have space for.
Right.
And the result is feeling overwhelmed.
Right. Or burnout and like disconnected.
Right. And then you miss that opportunity right in front of you because all your mental space is being used up.
Yeah.
And it takes away from the mission that's right in front of you. Because I believe that just like the three of us, every single person listening, God has placed you exactly where you are right now with a purpose.
Absolutely.
You know, and if all your cognitive space, your mental space is all jumbled with stuff happening all over the world in a way that we weren't actually programmed to be able to do anything with that in our minds, we might miss those chances. Like I said, they're right in front of you. That's a really good point, though, man.
So if we're in a spot, I think we really find ourselves in a place where we have callings that are in front of us, and this news that we're hearing about is affecting us deeply for good reason, because we were created in God's image to care and have empathy in times of crisis. And we start to find ourselves getting a little overwhelmed. Is that just how it's meant to be, or is there another option? Does this amount of news need to rule and steer our lives, or is there another option?
What I've been thinking about the last couple of weeks is this quote that I've heard. I don't even remember the author, but whoever it is, it's not me, someone smarter than I am. But they were talking along addiction and talking about it's very hard to become satisfied with something that almost works. And filling our lives with so much information and news almost works.
It's a little hit.
Almost feels like we're getting somewhere.
Right.
And I think you're right. Like, there has to be time when we put our phone down and disconnect because we weren't designed, like God did not design us to have a cell phone constantly attached to our hand.
Yeah.
Right.
That we're constantly being fed information at like astronomical rates.
Right.
That we can't even absorb it. Like most of it is just going, like you'll even see it in news articles. It's like when you reload, it's the same news, just worded differently to like catch our attention again.
Yeah. And I'll still read every article.
And I'll still read it. Yeah. It's crazy.
So how do we break out of that?
Well, I mean, I think for me, it's deciding that I am in control of my phone. My phone is not going to control me. Because those things are powerful. Yeah. And look, I'm speaking from a position as I'm working through this too. I'm not perfect by any means. This is something that I'm still trying to get better at. And I have good days, and I have days where the first thing I do is I check the COVID stats first thing when I wake up, and that just gets my day started all wrong. So I'm working through this too. But I think a big principle is deciding that I am going to take back control over my life. And a big part of that would be your phones. And so telling your phone you're staying in this room when I'm sleeping, or you're staying off at this time. Or for me, I delete Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and Snapchat, those apps off my phone throughout my workday. So I can be effective and I can execute what God has put in front of me that day to do. And then when I go home, you know, there's times where I give myself, okay, you can download it back, check in, and
treat yourself.
Treat yourself, yeah, a little hit.
little
treat
hit.
myself. But man, I feel so good when I can do that. And then I get home and I'm like, man, I was so productive today. And there was a lot of bad news that was out there. And now I feel like I can take that news in a spot where I'm saying, I'm ready for this now. I'm just going to quickly check in. And if it's too much, you know, I'm back. I'll delete the apps again after I check it out. And then I can just get back to kind of what God has put before me, you know, in real life with, you know, loving my wife and being a good friend and being a good pastor and stuff. So those are some of the things that I'm doing practically to take back control over my cell phone.
And in life, there's so many uncontrollable variables that it's very important for the ones that are controllable that we take advantage of those.
Right.
Things that we can say no to, things that we can say yes to, so that when those uncontrollable variables come into place, that we will be as prepared as we can be for what the world throws at us.
Control the controllables.
Control the controllables.
That's a sports thing, but it's super true.
Resonates.
Yeah,
that's actually a philosophy from Zack, so I just stole it from him to look smarter.
There you go. And you did look smart.
And I did.
You did it.
I write my notes in blue ink, but I look smart.
So Brock, earlier today, you brought up a book of the Bible that gave you a little bit of insight and perspective into this whole topic, and it was the book of Ecclesiastes, which is one of my favorite books of the Bible. Some people say it's depressing. I think it's realistic.
That's what I said earlier.
Lucas said it's depressing. And
that was my line from earlier.
Yeah. I love it, though, because when I see something in the Bible that is just so
it's
real
and
familiar with my experience, I realize I'm not the first one, because this book was written over 2,000 years ago, and the guy's wrestling through the same things I am, so I'm not the only crazy one.
Right. I know there's some books of the Bible when I'm like, I just can't measure up.
Yeah.
But Ecclesiastes,
they set this standard and call you up to it, and Ecclesiastes is this commentary on life that feels very familiar and very modern.
Yeah. Oh, so
and you pulled something from that book.
Yeah. This verse has been like speaking to me throughout this whole fall as we've been preparing.
Yeah.
Ecclesiastes 3 verse 11, and that's eternity has been written on our hearts. Some versions say planted in our hearts, which is crazy to think about, that inside of all of us, not just if you give your heart to Jesus, but inside of all of us, there's this longing for eternity.
Right.
There's this longing for more than the world can offer us. And as youth, like, we're constantly on apps trying to find something that will satisfy. As
stuff
adults,
that almost works.
Stuff that almost works.
Yeah.
And as adults, we're thinking this much a year will make us happy. This white picket fence, until we get there and realize that there's actually eternity written on our hearts.
Yeah.
So temporary won't fill that.
Right.
It has to be filled with the eternal.
I absolutely love that. And actually, just as you were saying that, it reminded me of something. As you talk about, looking to attain and then having peace, I wonder if at times we've really romanticized the pre-COVID life to this point where we're like, when we get the vaccine or when this pandemic is over, everything will be fine and there'll be no challenges anymore. Like, as if we were all happy before the pandemic.
We were all great.
Yeah,
everything was
life
together.
is good,
yeah, like there was nothing to talk about at youth group because everyone was just having this phenomenal life experience with no challenges.
All we did was games.
No, we were still talking to people. Like as youth pastors, we were still helping people discover purpose because they felt purposeless.
Right.
That's not new.
Right.
Now we're just purposeless and bored.
Yeah.
Right? People were still like having a wrestle with their self-image, but they could distract themselves by hanging out with people and not thinking about it. So yeah, we do have some new problems, but I think we actually are just more face-to-face with a lot of our old problems, and we can't run and hide from them anymore. They're not new. And because of that, they're also not going to go away when COVID goes away.
Yeah.
Because things weren't perfect before.
Right.
And they're not going to be perfect after.
Right. So what you're saying is the end of COVID isn't going to be the end of our problems. Like a lot of us seem to think we need a real fix to fill that hole in our hearts that you were talking about, Brock.
And Ecclesiastes talks about that, right? That eternity, the desire for something solid is built into us. And we're trying to fill that with news, but the news is not solid. And when I say news, we have like the 24-hour news cycle. You've got your CTV, your CNN, your Fox or whatever.
All unbiased.
All unbiased, all terribly unbiased. None of them make more money by making their information shocking whatsoever. They're just straight.
I love that about the news.
Yeah.
I love that.
Well, and that's the reality, right? Is these guys make more money if their stuff is more interesting. And what's more interesting than thinking that your life might be ruined? Right? That's going to get attention. Yeah. So we have to realize that that's the bias they're bringing in. So they're not great guys to trust for stability. But then add on top of that, even just the news about, what's going to happen with youth next week, or what's going to happen at school, or my sports team, or, does my relative have COVID? Like what, this new information, none of it is solid and foundational. Right. And as people who follow Jesus, we have this calling, this opportunity, this gift of having a foundation that is far removed from what happens to us. Right. And when that news, when that information is our foundation and we just kind of add whatever is current, I think we're in a really healthy spot to engage with whatever's in front of us, like you were talking about.
I honestly don't know what I would do without that foundation. Right. Because I even think back to, even for me yesterday, tough day. There's a lot of bad news, and I just think, like, where do I go if I can't fall back on Jesus? Because at the end of the day, I know I have that foundation, and I know that he's in control. So I know when I have a day like that, at the end of the day, my faith is in God and I trust him. And I'm like, man, I know I lived so much of my life without that foundation, or really trusting in that foundation, and I just floundered.
And I think that's like Ecclesiastes, beautiful that like all of us, we can relate to that feeling of there's got to be something more. And how beautiful is it that Jesus designed us that way, that we would seek after the Father, that would be the natural inclination. Like the world is trying to distract us and, this will solve it. But he's just almost whispering, saying, hey, I designed you for more and I have a plan for your life. And that should be, wherever we're listening to this or watching this, that should be the most encouraging thing, that, man, we were designed to pursue the Father with everything that we have. Yeah. That eternity was planted in our hearts so that we could chase after Jesus. Dang.
Like, that's a word. How beautiful is that, to realize that these frustrations we have are actually telling us who we were meant to be.
Come on.
Isn't that great? Isn't that like there's a beauty in that these things that are driving us crazy, the reason I feel so broken when I hear about injustice is why? Because I was built for justice, because I was made by a just God. So it's actually a very beautiful thing.
Right.
If you find yourself heartbroken when you hear about injustice, I know when I feel heartbroken, my natural reaction is like, this is bad, I want it to stop.
Right.
But what you're reminding me is that these pains, this longing for something else, is evidence that what we are engaging with is so much bigger than us.
Come on. Yeah, that's so good. And I think even as pastors, we just want to leave all of you guys with something for our groups individually and just for a whole, some wisdom that we do in our life that has not made it perfect, but something that helps us along the way. We're not the finished product, but we're working our way towards Jesus. And my encouragement would be dig deep in this time, would be that it's so easy to become so isolated and alone. This is the time where you dig deep, you reach out, whatever that looks like, Zoom calls, Facebook messages, Instagram, write your leaders. We can't do anything well unless we do it together.
Let's go.
Yeah, I love that you said that, Brock, because, I've spent, 18 months as youth pastor, not a long time, but I keep coming back to the same next steps over and over, and I feel like sometimes Lucas is full of crap. He's saying the same things. There's no way this really works, but it's being in community, and I think all of our groups do an awesome job of having leaders that are there for them. There's friends that they can make there, and just being able to do this life with people, like even how we do it together. You know, I don't know what I'd do without you guys. You know, having you guys that we can do life together, the same principle applies to all the students listening. And so let's just lean into that as a next step today. Keep it simple, right? I really believe that we all need to, especially in this Christian life and trying to follow Jesus in a world that it can look like it's kind of burning around us, right? It's a difficult world right now. I just feel like we need to lean into that community. And so leaning into your leaders, leaning into the friends that you've made at youth, I think that's going to be really important. And I think when this kind of passes, we're going to be so grateful that we did that, and we're going to have some great relationships as well.
It really boils down to fundamentals.
Right.
Like just keep it simple, the fundamentals of what Christianity looks like in community and with people. And Zach.
Yeah, no, and I think you raise a good point, Lucas, that sometimes it's like, oh, it can't be that simple. That won't really work. And if you find yourself in that situation today where that's what you're thinking, like, it can't be that simple, just try it and see if it doesn't work.
Right.
Because I made that decision about 11 years ago, and my life has never been the same. One just real simple thing, I shared this with my group last week that's been so helpful for me, is when I feel a little bit overwhelmed and a little bit like things are kind of just way too far out of my control, I started a note on my phone called Things I Can Do Today to Be Faithful. And I just write down something that I know is within God's will that I could possibly do. Because God's made his will really clear. Like there's some things that we need him to tell us, and there's a lot of things he's just already told us. So for me, it's, like email my grandparents and just check in and see how they're doing is something that's made its way onto my list. And that list has grown, and it's always usually just about enough for one day.
Right.
And they're really simple things. But like you said, when you're faithful with the things that are in front of you, life becomes a lot more beautiful. And I'm trying to learn that because I can get distracted by what's not possible. So I think God's growing me in that way.
Cool.
Yeah, so this conversation has been a ton of fun. I personally feel so encouraged and just kind of a little bit more ready to get back out there than I did before this chat. And this is something we're going to try to put together regularly and something we're going to do a little more often. So you can keep your eyes peeled for some more of these videos. Brock, Lucas, and I are going to continue having these conversations. And you can send us your questions as well. If there's something you want us to talk about, fire a message to one of our social accounts or emails, track us down, and we'll keep talking.
Yeah, that's great.
Awesome.